I feel like I've run out of options. Talking to my mom is impossible, she's already on edge, walking through the house like a ghost of herself. And my dad, no, I can't. He's the reason I'm even writing this. The worst part is, I honestly thought I was doing the right thing. I believed I was protecting him, maybe even saving his life. But now, with the way things are, I'd give anything to hear him shouting again. The silence we live in now feels so heavy, like it's pressing down on the house itself. Sometimes I catch my dad's eyes when he looks at me, and it's like I'm staring into something broken beyond repair. And I know, without a doubt, that I made a mistake. We weren't always like this. I grew up in what felt like the safest, most ordinary place you could imagine. A two-story home with a big backyard, the kind of house people buy when they're ready to settle down and raise kids. My mom filled the yard with flowers every spring, roses, marigolds, hydrangeas. She used to joke that she loved them more than us because at least they didn't talk back. My dad was different. He was quiet, steady, the kind of man who didn't lose his temper, didn't take risks, didn't gamble. He worked a job in logistics, reliable and boring. The only thing that seemed to really light him up was his garden. Gardening was his escape. He'd come home after a long day, loosen his tie, and head straight outside to kneel in the dirt. It was his ritual, his way of keeping the world at bay. And because of that, I never questioned it when he came home one afternoon carrying a small crumpled paper bag, his eyes practically glowing with excitement. He spilled the contents into his palm and showed me. A seed. But not like any seed I'd ever seen. It was huge, almost the size of a pigeon's egg, dark and heavy, with strange faint spirals etched across the surface. Got it from an old street vendor downtown, he told me, his voice oddly reverent. Said it's special. Said it'll grow into a tree like no other, a king among trees. Said it'll protect this house. I was only 10. To me it was just a cool-looking seed, and my dad being dramatic again, he always got a little poetic when it came to plants. I remember him kneeling with me in the middle of the backyard, digging a neat little hole, lowering the strange seed into the soil. It felt like a special father-son moment. At the time, I thought it was just another good memory. I didn't realize it would mark the beginning of the end. Because that seed didn't just grow. It consumed everything. The tree didn't grow the way normal trees do. It shot up like it had been waiting all along, as if the soil had been holding its breath. Within a single year, it was taller than me. Within 2, it was taller than the shed. My dad was ecstatic. He built a tiny wooden fence around its base, not to protect it from animals, but almost like he was marking sacred ground. He told us no one else was allowed to touch it. Not to water it, not to prune it. That was his job. His alone. At first, my mom and I just laughed it off. He'd always been a little intense about his garden. This was just another hobby taken too far, we thought. And for a while, it seemed harmless. He'd come in after hours outside, his fingernails caked with dirt, that quiet satisfied smile on his face. When he talked about the tree, though, his words started to change. It wasn't just growing well or looking healthy. It was, the tree's in a good mood today. Or, it liked the rain. I brushed it off as him being quirky. My mom looked less amused. By the time I was in my 20s, the tree was monstrous. It towered over our house, a massive wall of dark, almost black bark that felt too smooth for something that had started as a seed. Its leaves were glossy, so deep a green they almost looked artificial, drinking in the sunlight in a way that made the air around it seem darker. That's when things started to go wrong. The first to suffer were the other plants. My mom's roses, her pride and joy, wilted and died no matter how carefully she tended them. The vegetable patch shriveled into brittle stems. Anything that fell under the tree's spreading shadow simply stopped living. The soil hardened and turned gray, like the life had been leached out of it. Then the animals disappeared. Birds that used to nest in the yard were gone. Squirrels vanished. Even our dog, a golden retriever who loved nothing more than chasing tennis balls across the lawn, refused to step foot past the back door. He'd just stand there, whining, tail between his legs, staring at the base of the tree like something was waiting there. But the worst change wasn't outside. It was in my dad. The tree consumed him. Slowly at first, he'd spend longer hours sitting under it, watering the soil even when the ground was already damp, brushing his hands along its bark as if he could feel something I couldn't. Then, one day, he quit his job without warning. Said he needed more time at home. Needed to be with it. That's when I knew something was deeply wrong. He wasn't just tending to the tree. He was listening to it. I'd catch him from the window, lips moving, his head tilted like he was straining to hear something only he could. And when Mom begged him to come inside, to eat, to sleep, to be with us, he'd only smile that unsettling, vacant smile. I'm not hungry. The shadow feeds me. You'd understand if you sat with me. It's peaceful. It'll comfort you too. But we never did. There was something about that shadow that made my skin crawl. It wasn't just shade. It was heavy. Standing at the edge of it felt like standing at the edge of deep water, where you know one wrong step could drag you under. And my dad had already stepped in. The decline wasn't sudden, it crept in the way sickness does, quietly, until one day you realize it's everywhere. Dad stopped coming inside for meals altogether. He'd sit beneath the tree from sunrise until long after the sky went black, only dragging himself inside for a few hours of restless sleep in his armchair. His face thinned, his skin turned pale and waxy, and his eyes. God, his eyes. They didn't look like his anymore. There was this strange glow in them, like he was staring at something far away that only he could see. He was wasting away right in front of us, but he didn't seem bothered. If anything, he looked almost content. Mom tried. She begged him in every way a wife can beg a husband. She cried, screamed, pleaded. Sometimes she'd bring food out to him, setting plates at the edge of the shadow like offerings, only for them to sit untouched until she broke down and carried them back inside. He would just shake his head and whisper, "The tree gives me all I need." That's when I started to realize what was happening. It wasn't that he was feeding it, it was feeding on him. And worse, he was letting it. I can't describe what the shadow felt like when I forced myself to step closer. It wasn't just cold, it was draining, as though something was pulling the warmth right out of my blood. My chest tightened every time I lingered near it. I swear, even the air felt heavier there, like breathing in thick water. The breaking point came in those last weeks. Dad barely slept at all. He spent every waking second beneath the tree, his body trembling from exhaustion but his face plastered with that vacant smile. He didn't even look at us anymore. He belonged to it. And I knew if I didn't act, it was going to kill him. So I decided. The tree had to go. I waited until one night when Mom finally cried herself to sleep. I sat by the window, watching Dad outside, his body motionless on that little bench. He didn't move for hours, just staring upward into the branches. Finally, just before dawn, he stumbled inside and collapsed in his chair. His breathing grew heavy, his head drooping. That was my chance. I slipped into the garage and grabbed the splitting axe. It felt impossibly heavy in my hands, like I already knew what I was walking into. My palms were sweating, my heart beat loud enough I was sure it would wake him. When I opened the back door, the moonlight lit the yard in silver. Everything was still. But where the tree stood, the shadow was absolute, a patch of darkness so deep it looked like a hole in the world. I stepped in. The cold hit me immediately. It wasn't the chill of night air, it was deeper, sharper, like it had claws. My breath caught in my throat, and every part of me screamed to turn back. But I couldn't. Not when I thought of my dad's hollow face. I reached the trunk. The bark was black and slick, almost wet, and when my fingers brushed it, it felt disturbingly close to skin. I raised the axe, my arms shaking, and just as the blade touched the surface, I heard it. A whisper. Right beside my ear. Don't. I froze. The yard was empty. No one was there. My dad was inside. My mom was asleep. But the voice, it wasn't just in my head. I felt the breath of it on my skin. For a moment, I nearly dropped the axe. But then I thought of Dad, of the way the tree had hollowed him out, and rage carried me forward. I tightened my grip, spat into my palms, and swung. The first strike didn't sound like wood. I expected that sharp, splintering crack an axe makes when it bites into a trunk, but instead there was a dull, wet thud, like hitting a slab of raw meat. The blade sank deeper than it should have, and when I yanked it free, something dark and viscous oozed from the wound. At first I thought it was sap. Until the smell hit me. Metallic. Heavy. Familiar. Blood. I staggered back, gagging, my hand shaking as I reached out and touched it with my fingertips. Sticky, warm, red-black in the moonlight. There was no mistaking it. The tree was bleeding. Every part of me screamed to run. To drop the axe and never look back. But then I saw Dad's face in my mind, sunken, ghostly, smiling at something I couldn't see. And I forced myself forward again. I swung. Again. And again. Each impact sent a sickening vibration up my arms. The sound was unbearable, a mixture of wet tearing and muffled groans, as if the tree itself were alive and in pain. Thick streams of blood spilled down the bark, pooling at the base, soaking into the dirt until the soil turned black and slick. Then it happened, a low sound reverberated through the trunk, so deep it made my chest rattle. It wasn't creaking or cracking wood. It was a groan. A living, guttural sound, as though something inside the tree had been wounded. I kept swinging. My arms were on fire, sweat poured down my face, but I couldn't stop. Not until the gash widened and the whole tree shuddered like an animal in its death throes. Then, with a violent snap and a scream of splintering flesh, not wood, flesh, it toppled. The crash shook the ground, branches smashing through my mom's flower beds, scattering shards of pottery like bones. Then came the silence. Shaking, gasping for air, I turned my flashlight to the stump. And what I saw has been burned into my mind ever since. It wasn't wood inside. It wasn't even close. The interior was a mass of sinew and muscle, dark, fibrous strands woven together like tendons, glistening with blood. And at the center of it all, half fused into the trunk itself, was a human torso. A ribcage. A spine. Flesh, pale and rubbery, preserved like something caught in amber. I realized with horror that when I split the tree, I had split that body in two. Blood still gushed from it, pouring freely, soaking into the earth. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't even think. My mind just shut down. Who was that? What was that? Was this what Dad had been speaking to all this time? And then, from behind me, a voice broke the silence. Burn it. I spun around, the flashlight beam slicing across the yard. My father was standing on the patio, barefoot, his face gaunt and hollow, his eyes locked on the broken, bleeding trunk. His voice was hoarse, his expression devastated, like a man who had lost everything. Dad? My voice cracked. He didn't even look at me. His gaze stayed fixed on the carcass of the tree. We have to burn it, he said again, his tone flat, lifeless. All of it. Now. We didn't argue. There was no discussion. We just moved, as if the command had come from something larger than both of us. Dad grabbed the axe from my trembling hands, and for the first time in months he looked alive, not calm, not peaceful, but grim, purposeful. Together we hacked the fallen branches into pieces. The wet, fibrous inside squelched with every strike, spraying that dark blood across the grass. I tried not to gag as the smell clung to the back of my throat, thick and nauseating, like rotting meat mixed with copper. We dragged the pieces into a heap in the center of the yard. The body at the heart of the trunk, that half-exposed, pale torso, Dad wouldn't even glance at it. He worked mechanically, like he was forcing himself not to see what was really there. By the time we finished, the pile looked less like a tree and more like the remains of some slaughtered beast. My hands were blistered, my shirt plastered to my skin with sweat and blood that wasn't mine. Dad moved like an old man, every step slow and deliberate, but he never stopped. Finally, he disappeared into the garage and came back with a red gasoline can. He didn't say a word as he poured it over the heap, the fumes burning my nose. Then he struck a match. The fire roared to life instantly, flames leaping high, black smoke curling into the night sky. The sound was horrifying, not the normal crackle of burning wood, but a wet, shrieking hiss, as though the flames were devouring flesh. The smell was worse. Acrid, greasy, a stench that clung to my hair and skin and made my stomach lurch. We stood there for hours, watching it burn. Neither of us spoke. My dad's face was rigid, unreadable, except for his eyes filled with a grief so raw it felt wrong to look at them. It was like he was watching someone he loved being destroyed. When the fire finally died, all that remained was a circle of blackened earth and glowing embers. The tree, the thing, was gone. For the first time in years, the backyard was empty. No looming shadow, no oppressive weight hanging in the air. Just scorched earth and silence. And I truly thought, that I'd done the right thing. That I'd saved him. But I was wrong. The tree was gone. Its shadow, that heavy suffocating darkness that had stretched across the yard for years, had finally lifted. The air felt clearer, the space wider, as if something had been unshackled. For a brief moment, I let myself believe I'd freed him. The next morning, my father sat at the kitchen table with my mom. He ate the eggs she put in front of him. He drank his coffee. He even slept in his own bed that night for the first time in months. From the outside, it looked like he was back. But inside the house, something was still wrong. The serenity that had once covered his face, that strange, eerie calm that terrified us, was gone. In its place was a constant, jittering tension. He couldn't sit still. He paced the hallways at night, staring out the windows at the empty patch of scorched earth in the yard. Every little sound made him flinch, the creak of a stair, the hum of the refrigerator, even the wind against the windows. And the silence. God, the silence. He didn't speak. Not once. Not to Mom. Not to me. Days passed, and he just kept moving through the house like a man waiting for something to happen, his eyes darting constantly to the backyard. Sometimes, though, he would stop and look at me. And those looks, they gutted me. His eyes weren't angry. They weren't even resentful. They were hollow, broken, haunted. As if he knew something I didn't, as if he was carrying the weight of it alone, and I had taken away the only thing that kept him from collapsing under it. I thought I had cut out the cancer. That I had destroyed the thing that was draining him. But now, I can't shake the feeling that the tree wasn't just feeding on him. It was giving him something too. Something I destroyed when I brought it down. I traded a man who was smiling but lost, for one who is present but shattered. And now I can't stop asking myself, what was inside that tree? Who, or what, had fused with it? Was that what my father had been listening to, all those nights in the dark? The silence in this house is unbearable now. Louder than screaming. Louder than any shadow. And I don't know what's worse, that the thing is gone, or that maybe, just maybe, it's still here.